So I am in my room at home, as you can see. Sorry that the angle's a little bad. I don't have any way to set my phone up, so it's on the window right now. For a long time, I wanted to make book videos and kind of talk about books I do read. Literally just if you have ever seen book YouTube, which is kind of embarrassing, that's what I want to do. And I'll still make the vlogs and everything else on my channel, but I really want to do book videos. And since I'm home right now, I thought I could do some book videos. So I have, let me count how many, 16 books to recommend. These are some of my favorite books. Not of all time, I don't think, because there's so many books that I love. It would be impossible for me to pick all of them that I like. But these are some of my favorite ones. I really highly recommend them. Some of them will be for the authors, but I just picked one book. So yeah, I split it up into kind of romance-ish and then fantasy kind of. I'll tell you what genre it is when I recommend it. So starting off, I have Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. I just picked this book. I discovered Abby Jimenez last year, and I never read anything by her. This is one of her books. She has 6 books out right now. She's coming out with another one this year. I love her books so much. She's so literally one of my favorite authors now. I love all of them. Yours Truly is one of my personal favorites. So she's a nurse, and then there's a new doctor that shows up at the hospital, and they get off on the wrong foot, but then it turns out he's actually super sweet, super nice. It's really good. So this is kind of doctor-ish, hospital-ish. I highly recommend her books. She is probably one of the best authors I've ever read. Every single book that I've read by her has been 4 or 5 stars, immediately. So this one's really good. This is just a romance book. Yeah. Next up, so this one is a young adult book. This is Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter. And this is the first Lynn Painter book I think I read, and I read it in one sitting. I sat down and read it literally start to finish. Everybody talks about this book, but I was really scared to read it. It just didn't sound interesting because I had started it once and I didn't like it. And then when I started it again, I read it in one sitting. So this, I guess I can kind of tell you guys what a little bit of the book is about in case you want to read it. This book is about these 2 high schoolers, Liz and Wes, and they're next door neighbors. They don't like each other. They, just don't get along. Liz is obsessed with romance movies and rom-coms and things like that, and so she gets with Wes to get him to help her go out with his friend. So as he's helping her to do that, obviously they start to catch feelings and start liking each other. And she just came out with a new book. So this is Liz and Wes in high school, and then the new book is about them in college, so it's really good. And then my next book is Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. So this book is a second chance romance, kind of goes back and forth between the present and the past. It's basically this girl Macy. I've not read this book in so long, but it's one of my favorites. It's about Macy and Elliot, and Macy and her dad have this weekend getaway house, and the next door neighbor to that house is Elliot, and so they kind of grow up together. When Macy's family is at this house, they bond over reading and books and stuff like that, and then they end up breaking up, and they run into each other in the present, and then you kind of figure out what happened between them. It's really good. I love this book. I recommend this book all the time. My next book, if you know me at all in person, you know that I can never stop talking about this book series. It is one of my favorite book series of all time. I read it for the first time last summer, and that is Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. This book, it literally has, I read this book. Mind you, I started this series last summer. Since then, I've read this first book 3 times. I've reread it 3 times. It is so, oh my gosh, it's so good. I love it so much. This is basically set in London, and it's this group of friends, high society in London, and they are really rich, millionaires. They're in their 20s, and it's basically just following them and following the drama that goes on. Let me tell you, anytime I recommend this book, people will read it and they'll be like, I didn't like this first book. This first book is not meant to like. This is setting you up for the rest of the books. This is not going to be a good book. you have to keep reading. It's specifically following Magnolia Parks and BJ Valentine, and they have dated all their childhood and like growing up, and then you find out pretty early, it's not like a spoiler or anything, but like they have broken up and they are soulmates, and it's really, really hard because they're just so in love, and their friend group is like all together, and it's just them making mistakes over and over and over again and trying to find their way back to each other. This is the best book I think I've ever read. It's not for everybody though. It's not for everybody. You have to go in knowing that it's like gonna be toxic. There's gonna be things that you literally are so mad about and like you just want to put the book down. It's so good. And then the last book, Into the Dark, is my favorite book I've ever read of all time. I sat on the couch and sobbed while I read it. It was so good. Yeah, but I wouldn't recommend this book if you're not like patient and like read multiple books to kind of get the big picture. If you're just gonna read the first one and then be like, no, I don't like it, then you don't even read it because you're not gonna enjoy it. Like I said, it's really toxic. It's really, they're very childish. They have a horrible relationship. They just can't stay away from each other. It's so good. Okay, I need to stop talking about that because this is one of my favorite book series of all time. So, next I have Happy Place by Emily Henry. This book, I just picked this one out because this is my favorite by Emily Henry, but I would really recommend any book by her. She is really, really good. She's kind of similar to Abby Jimenez, and she is classified in the genre of romance, but I would say it's more like women's fiction and like kind of like a subplot of romance. There's always like a bigger story going on than just like two people meeting and falling in love. I love Happy Place. Happy Place is about this group of friends, and I cannot remember the names of these people. Harriet and Wynn. Okay, so Harriet and Wynn dated, I think, in college. And so now they have this whole group of friends, and every year they meet up and go to this house in Maine. And the last time the friends saw them, Harriet and Wynn were engaged. Well, now they've broken up. They're not engaged anymore, but they pretend that they're engaged just to make the week good because it's the last week that they'll ever get to go to this house because the people who own the house that they go to stay, they're selling it, so they won't get to go anymore. So it just is kind of going back and forth between the present and the past and what it was like when they were dating, and then you slowly find out like why they broke up in the first place. This book is really, really good. I love this book. Like I said, it's probably my favorite of Emily Henry's books that she's ever written. I've read all of them. She is coming out with a new one this year, which I'll read, but this one is my favorite, so it's probably going to be a little hard to beat. That was it for the romance that I have. This one is Mary Jane by Jessica Anya Blue. I don't know how to say her. I'm so sorry. But this book is basically about this girl, Mary Jane, set in the 1970s. She gets a job babysitting for this family, and her family, Mary Jane's family, is very conservative, very like a little strict, and she starts babysitting for this kind of hippie family, and it's just her getting to see the world through like a different perspective and like being exposed to things. It's really, really good. This is another book I sat and read in one sitting, and I have since made everybody that I know read this book, so highly recommend. Now, I am not a big thriller or like horror book kind of person. I actually hate thrillers. I've read one and I enjoyed it, but I would never pick up another one again. I do like young adult mystery and thriller because it's not super scary. I get scared very, very easily, and the young adult is like still like a little to keep you like on the edge of your seat, but it's not like so scary. So just one recommendation I have, A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. It's about this girl Pip, and in her hometown there was a murder, and this girl died, and they think it was the boyfriend that killed her. And for her senior project, she decides to re-examine the case and figure out who did it because she's convinced that it wasn't the boyfriend. Really, really, really good. I loved this book. The second one is kind of okay. It still follows Pip. You don't have to read all of them because there's like a new mystery for each book. The last one is really, really, really good. I highly recommend. Obviously, I highly recommend all these books because I'm suggesting them, but this one's really good. So now on to the fantasy, and I have like some young adult fantasy and then some just regular fantasy. First, Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This book it's a hit or miss, honestly, with some people. Some people really did not like the second book. I loved the second book. I don't know what people like didn't like about it. I mean, I do know why they didn't like it, but I loved it, and there's another book coming out, and I'm really excited. This book is about Peyton and Kai is a prince. So in this world, they have these ordinaries who are people with no powers, and then you have the other people. the elites, they have powers, and it's all different powers. And the king thinks that if the elites and the ordinaries like continue to like get married and stuff, it's basically going to take the power away that the elites have. It's gonna like kind of dilute their power. So Kai, he is called the enforcer. His job is to go out and kill the ordinaries. Well, of course, Peyton is an ordinary pretending to be an elite so she doesn't die. There's these competitions that you can like compete in, and it's kind of like the Hunger Games a little bit, not really, but like you go and compete, and it's typically only people who are elites, and they like will compete, and the winner gets something. I don't actually know what they get. Somehow Peyton ends up having to compete in this competition. She doesn't have any powers. Everyone else has powers. She is gonna die. This is essentially what it is. And she meets Kai, and they obviously get along, and they start, well, they don't get along actually. They just have to work together for stuff. Really, really good. And the second book is really good. I loved it. Okay, next book is Trial of the Sun Queen by Nisha J. Tooley. I'm not sure. This is a 4-book series. I haven't read the most recent one because I just got it for Christmas, but this book, the fantasy books are kind of hard to explain. It's about this girl, Lore. This is giving very much Throne of Glass, which I'll talk about Throne of Glass in a little bit. It's one of my favorite series, obviously. A common theme you'll notice with fantasy books is there's trials in like every single fantasy book, which I love trials in fantasy books, so I'm not complaining, but it can be a little repetitive if you read them like over and over and over again. So this book is about Lore, and her siblings are in this like slave camp kind of situation, and she gets pulled out of it and has to go, this sounds exactly like Throne of Glass, but she has to get taken to compete in the Sun Queen trials to become the Sun King's queen, obviously. But the people in the territory where this competition is being held, they have been training for this their whole lives, and she's just like starved, she's weak, she like has no training. In these competitions there's like strength, and there's like stuff about like the history of the land, and obviously she doesn't know any of that, so she's at a really big disadvantage. And I think there's 10 girls that compete for the to be the queen, and 9 of them were from this territory, but they pick somebody who's like from poverty just to kind of show that they're not playing favorites. I don't really know. I really like this book, and the world gets like more in depth and more detailed as you continue. This first book was really easy to read, and then as you read it gets a little bit more complicated, but that's just how fantasy books are. I really like this book. Highly recommend. Next, I have Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This book is about Jax is the Prince of Hearts, and her name's Evangelina, but I think we call her like Evangeline. Wait, her name's Evangeline. I don't know if we call her Eva or something like that. Once again, I read this a couple years ago. Still really good. She wants to make a wish and like get this guy to fall in love with her, something like that. I'm not too sure. And so she gets the help of the Prince of Hearts, Jax. But he's like kind of conniving, and he's always lying, and it's this very fairy tale world. So like if you like the idea of any kind of fairy tale, this is very whimsical, it's very magical, really, really good. This is a trilogy, it's completed, but I really liked it. It's not my favorite book I've ever read, but it's a good start if you're interested in fantasy. But yeah, highly recommend. Okay, next is so I said Magnolia Parks was one of my favorite series. Magnolia Parks is like my favorite romance series. This next series is my favorite series for fantasy. Of course, Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. This book, or this series really, so good. So I actually have another recommendation from her. In high school, I read ACOTAR, which I really liked. It was really good. Everyone says it's good. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to read Throne of Glass because you just need to read all of her books. So Throne of Glass is about this girl, Selena. She is an assassin. She doesn't have any family, and what is his name? I can't even think of his name. The king of the assassins like takes her in and trains her to work for him. So she's an assassin, but she ends up getting caught, which you know that basically immediately because she is in the salt mines of Endovier, and you're not supposed to live like past a couple months in these salt mines, and she's been there for like 2 or 3 years. And one day the prince of the kingdom comes and gets her and takes her to the castle. So this world, there's no magic. The king has outlawed magic. Magic's not allowed. I think he kills anybody with magic. So the king needs it's like the king's champion, which is basically means you work for the king as an assassin. You go out and kill people that the king doesn't like, and there's gonna be like a competition. So the best, the most ruthless in the land, they come together and have competition. And Dorian is the prince, and he gets to pick his, like, who he wants to compete, and he picks Selena. So she goes to the castle, and you need to compete in these competitions, and if you win, you'll be free. You don't have to go back to the salt mines. You'll live in the castle. You'll work for the king. This series, it's so much more than this book. Like, it's so much more. I can't even wrap my head around how big this series is, like the world that she's created, and you get a little bit of a taste of it in this book, but as you continue, like, more and more things are revealed. It's really, really good. I also would recommend House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J Maas. This book is really big. If you want to read any book by Sarah J Maas, you need to read ACOTAR first, then Throne of Glass. Well, you could read Throne of Glass, then ACOTAR, then Crescent City. It doesn't really matter if you read ACOTAR or Throne of Glass, which order, but you have to read Crescent City after you've read those two series. This book is so confusing when you first start. Every fantasy book that you'll ever read is kind of set in like the olden times. Like, they don't have any technology, they don't have anything, they don't live in a modern world is what it is. Well, this book is set in today's world, modern time, but there's all these different creatures. So there's like fae, there's mermaids, wolves. There's so many creatures. Like, every creature you could possibly even imagine is in this world. And this follows Bryce Quinlan, and she is a half fae. So her mom is a human and her dad's fae. She is a party girl. She doesn't really take anything seriously. She's just kind of wild, and there ends up being a murder, which I'm not gonna say who dies, but on the back of the book it says that there was a murder. So there's a murder, and it basically crushes her world, but she has to help this guy, Hunt Athalar, solve the case of the murder, because they think something like is horrible wrong. Some sort of creature has gotten loose and is starting killing people. So Bryce and Hunt work together. They don't like each other, obviously, and you just kind of follow them, kind of like a murder mystery, which I wish I had known that going into it, because it would have made a lot more sense. I highly recommend listening to it because it's so hard to read. Like, I'm telling you, probably the first 200, 300 pages, you're not gonna know what's going on. You're gonna have no idea. You're gonna be so confused, and you're gonna want to quit. But I really like this series. I loved the second book. The third book is not her best work, but the second book is one of my favorite books I've ever read. You just have to push through. It's one of those things you just gonna have to suck it up and push through and read the whole thing before you make an opinion about it. I have Daughter of the Pirate King by Teresa Levenseller. Now, this is a young adult fantasy book, and it is about, Alosa. I don't know how to say her name. Alosa? We're just gonna say Alosa. She obviously is the daughter of the Pirate King, and she has to like do this mission for her dad or whatever. I don't know if this is the first book or if the other one's the first book. So there's Daughter of the Pirate King and Daughter of the Siren Queen. I'm not sure which way they go. Every book by her, it's literally been so good. She has other books. I love her books. They're really, really good, easy to read. They're really fun, really easy to read, and they're really good. So next, I have A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kimmerer. So this book is a retelling of Beauty and the Beast. Now, this follows a girl, what is her name? Harper. She lives in the human world, and Prince Wren lives in obviously like this magical fairy world. He is cursed, and he has to repeat the autumn of his 18th year, like, over and over and over and over again. And what happens is he has to go to the human world and find a girl, bring her back, make them fall in love with him. Like, obviously, it has to be, like, real love, or else it's not going to work. And then I think the curse breaks or something like that. But if she doesn't fall in love with him, then he turns into this beast, which is, like, Beauty and the Beast. He turns into this beast kind of at the end of the season and, like, destroys his land. And it's really heartbreaking for him because he ends up... Actually, that's a spoiler. I can't say that. It's really heartbreaking for him because he doesn't want to become this beast, but he doesn't have a choice. So he goes to get Harper, this random girl. She comes and you just follow along her being with him and them getting along. Yeah, really good. Next, I have These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan. This book is a young adult fantasy book. I honestly don't really even know what this book's. I do know this book. I read this so long ago, but the reason I'm recommending this is because I just recently read another book by her that's in the same, it's like a continuation of the series, and it was so good. So I need to recommend this. It's about this girl, Bree, and her sister, I can't even think of what her sister's name is. It's kind of like a Cinderella story. They work for her stepmom, and the stepmom's horrible. And they live on the human side of the world, and then there's like the Fae lands, the fairy lands, and then the Seelie and Unseelie courts, which are like the good guys and the bad guys, like the two different kingdoms. They basically have to go over there and do some stuff. Magical, fun, easy to read. I tried to get my mom to read this. She did not even, I think she got like maybe one chapter and she didn't like it. She doesn't like fantasy books, so that doesn't count. Highly recommend it. This is the first book. The second book is These Twisted Bonds, and then the book I just read is Beneath These Cursed Stars, and I loved it. It was really, really, really good. If you're wanting like a really complicated read, don't read these young adult fantasy books I'm recommending, because they're not. They are young adult. They're very easy. They're gonna be predictable. They're gonna be kind of cheesy, but sometimes that's what you need. You know, sometimes this is what you want to read, and this is a good one for that. So my last book that I have to recommend is Divine Rivals by Rebecca Ross. Now, I picked up this book and I had kind of high expectations for it because this girl that I follow on YouTube, and like Instagram and everything, she really loved this book. So Divine Rivals is the first book. The second book is Ruthless Vows. Yes. And this is about this girl, Iris, and Roman. And they work at this newspaper company. This is also, I don't know if it says when this is set in, but it's like a long time ago. A long time ago. And there's these gods that are like asleep, but they're like waking up. It's kind of like mythical, like gods and goddesses. And there's like this war that's about to happen. And Roman and Iris, first of all, they don't get along. They don't like each other, I don't think. They both work at this newspaper place together, and then they end up kind of working together, like to kind of get the news report on this war, this battle that's going on. It's really good. A lot of people didn't like the second book because just the circumstances. I really liked it. It wasn't my favorite. I liked the first one better, but yeah, really good. If you like kind of like historical books and like fantasy, I would really recommend this one. This is pretty good. So that's all of the book recommendations that I have, all the books that I really like. I think it'd be really fun to also do a video about maybe popular books I didn't like, or books that maybe kind of let me down. That would be really fun. I could do some books I read last year, the books I want to read this year, bookshelf tour, show you guys all my books. Really whatever you guys want to see. If you hated this video, I'm really sorry. I will still be making book videos though, because I love to talk about books. So that's all I have to say. Thank you guys so much for watching. I once again hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys want to see. It doesn't have to be book stuff. There's like vlogs you want to see. Just let me know that. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're not already. All the boring stuff. Yeah. So I love you all so much. Thank you once again for watching, and I will see you guys hopefully next time. Bye.